Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Happiness Journey with Dr. Dan podcast, where every journey is worth living. My name is Dr. Dan, and I'm your host for today's episode. I am a cognitive behavior psychotherapist specializing in anger management issues, both court-appointed and private, marriage counseling, dissociative identity disorders, narcissistic personality disorders, depression, anxiety, and so much more. If you need any assistance, reach out to DMV Counseling and Therapy Services at 301-325-1550, and we're here to help. Today, I'm very excited to have on our podcast a very special guest and author of Success Factor, Ruth Gotian. Just like every of my past episodes, I will leave it up to the guests to properly introduce themselves, as no one can do a better job as her. Ruth, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Dr. Dan. Hi, everyone. My name is Dr. Ruth Gotian, based in New York. I study extreme high achievers, astronauts, Nobel Prize winners, Olympic champions, Fortune 500 CEOs, senior government officials to figure out what has made them so successful, how they have reached that success, maintained that success, and what we can learn about their path and how we can emulate that in our own lives. So I've researched these people, found the 4 elements of success, reversed engineered it, created a blueprint, and now I go around teaching about it, writing about it for Forbes and Nature and Psychology Today and Harvard Business Review. And I have a book about it called The Success Factor, because Dan, I don't believe anybody wakes up in the morning aiming to be average. I really think people want to be successful, but they've been trying all these random things in order to get it to happen. And that doesn't work. So at the age of 43, when I'm interested in something, I take a deep dive. So at the age of 43, while working full-time and raising my family, I went back to school and earned a doctorate in adult learning and leadership and really studied success from the inside out. And I haven't stopped since.
Wow. So what brought you to go into that specific career and wanting to be able to find and interview those who have succeeded in life and find out exactly what is their secret?
So prior to all of this, I used to run what's called an MD PhD program, the students who get the dual MD and PhD degree simultaneously. They're called physician scientists. It has a 3% acceptance rate. So these students are the best of the best, right? But even amongst this group, there were certain ones that would just float to the top. They really just stood out in other ways. And this field is long, it's hard, it's isolating, and many people were leaving. And we call that the Leaky Pipeline. And at our national conferences, all the conversations were about those who are leaving the scientific workforce, what we called, again, the Leaky Pipeline. And I said, well, what about all those who are succeeding so well that they're more than making up for those who are leaving? Mm-hmm. And then it turns out those high achievers are actually 400% more productive than an average employee. So I think we need to start focusing on those high achievers and figure out how we can make more of them. And once I realized that, I needed to really do that deep dive. And I actually went to one of my mentors who oversaw all MD PhD programs at the National Institutes of Health at the NIH. And when I was talking to him about the topic, he said, do something important, not just interesting. Because if it's important, it'll have an impact. If it's interesting, it's just a hobby. It's just for yourself. Yes. And that's when I started doing this national study. And fun fact, when I interviewed Dr. Tony Fauci and I asked him, how do you pick what projects to work on? Because there's so many cases he could have worked on, right? He worked on HIV, Ebola, SARS, Zika. He said, I look for what's important, not just interesting. And I was like, whoa. Now, 2 great scientists told me this. I have to follow this path. And here we are.
Wow, that's really interesting. Now, it's funny, it's just an interesting. Now, what in terms of like when you talk about Tony Fauci and the search for cure, I mean, every disease are important to find a cure. How does he differentiate what's important and what's essential or non-essential?
Well, I think that's the science, and that's where it's the impact of how many lives can you impact with your work. Okay. And once I realized that that is part of success, when I decided who I would interview, right? There are a lot of successful people, right? But that definition is very different for every person. But what I realized was that the super successful people who were able to maintain the success were able to do two things. They were able to create a paradigm shift in their field, meaning they were able to provide new knowledge that is so important and so revolutionary that it really can transform the field in some way. But they don't stop there. The next step that they do is that they actually pay it forward. As they move up and become even more successful, they bring other people up with them. So either one-on-one, they're mentoring people, or they're creating big programs for other people, because the work that they will do will be able to reach so many more people than if they just focused on themselves. So they're able to create and have that ripple effect. And that, I think, is the difference between a tabloid sensation and these people who are enormously successful and are able to have that positive ripple effect on others.
But this is also, it has to do a lot with the company culture that people work in, because sometimes, when you have the different hierarchy, people on top, they just like to stay on top. And for them, this is like more of a egoism versus others who wants to help others go up and bring them with them in the success ladder.
Right. That's so true. But, at the end of the day, the people who are truly successful, no matter what organization they're in, no matter what level of toxicity within their organization, they will always help other people. They will always focus on other people more than they focus on themselves. And I think that's really what makes the standout. And that's the difference between all of these great people who I've interviewed. Look, I was referred to many, many, many high achievers, and some of them didn't make the cut of people I was interested in interviewing because the focus was more on themselves than it was on others. And that is not sustainable. You are not going to have a legacy that is beyond yourself if you're just focused on yourself. You have to focus on that impact.
So what are the factors that you determine what is someone that is worthy enough for you to interview versus not? So basically, there's, like you said, there's a lot of high achievers. We'll look at Musk, Bezos, and all the others who have reached like above and beyond the billions. But now, of course, it's not determined based on the wealth. But how do you determine exactly who you will want to be able to waste, or not waste, but spend your time in interviewing?
So it's interesting. I started my research. My doctoral dissertation was actually on physician scientists. That was the people, the population who I knew best. And I looked at a factor of a number of things, including what we call their H index, how often they publish and people cite their publications, plus the national reputation for their work, et cetera. It was really a complicated list of things. But what I realized was that if you ask people what their definition of success is, you will not get the same definition. And it also varies based on gender and rank. So at the end of the day, it's really people who transform their field, have a national reputation for their work, and really pay it forward in some way. And it started with the physician scientists, some who won the Nobel Prize, but others like Dr. Fauci, who never won the Nobel Prize, but is considered to have transformed his field. So those were a lot of the people. And then when I finished that project, I was interested in the 4 elements of success, which I found that all of the physician scientists had, if I would find the same thing in other extreme high achievers. So I started interviewing astronauts, and from there it was Olympians, and from there it was CEOs, and it just kept going on and on and on. I have NBA All-Stars, right? Steve Kerr is in there. I have NFL Hall of Famers like Curtis Martin. And then I also have people you've never heard of, but who I think after the book is published will become household names because they have disrupted entire industries. So they all do the same 4 things, and they're not habits because we cannot copy other people's habits, right? If I'm a morning person and you're a night owl, you can't start waking up at 5:30 in the morning the way I wake up, right? Sure. My sharpest hours are 6 to 10 a.m.
Okay.
You're just, going to sleep at 3 a.m. So you're not going to wake up at 5:30 a.m. Right. So you cannot copy other people's habits, but you can learn from their mindsets. And that's really what I talk about in the book. The Success Factor are the 4 mindsets of these extreme high achievers. And then remember, I'm an adult educator. So I can't just tell you what these 4 mindsets are without actually teaching you how to implement it in your own life. And what I know from adult education, and this goes long before I was born, to the work of Malcolm Knowles, is that adults need choices. True. We need a buffet of options, because what works for me may not work for you. So it's not a one-size-fits-all model. And what works for me today may not work for me when I have a life transformation, a new job, a move, a new partner, another child, another responsibility, a pandemic, right? That's why we need to have these options for implementation, so that we can always have a choice, and that we're not constricted with one way, which may not fit the way we learn best. So that's why in the first section of the book, I talk about what is success and what is a high achiever. The second part of the Success Factor, I talk about the 4 elements. And then in the third part, I teach the reader how to actually implement it in their own lives with choices, so that you can pick what works for you today and change it whenever you need it.
So you would say that those 4 elements are very customizable based on everyone's life, and depending exactly what kind of experiences they have faced in the past and how they can implement it today. But again, if you said that what they want today may change tomorrow, so this is a continuous change in their own personality and behaviors that will enable them to be able to adapt a new change or a new perspective.
That's absolutely right. And look at us. Are we the same people we were in our 20s?
Oh, no.
No. I was a business major. I worked in finance. I don't work in finance anymore. I'm not passionate about that anymore. Right. But I am extremely passionate about success right now. That was not the case when I was in grad school, originally getting my master's. I was interested in business and finance. Very different world.
Was there
very different world
in your life that made you do that big shift? Or was it because you went into family, you had your husband, kids, etc., that you felt that the passion has subsided and you wanted to do something completely different?
I worked when I was in business school. I enjoyed it, and I found it challenging. But what I quickly learned, and I did finance for 2 years, what I quickly learned that there's a difference between being good at something and enjoying something. And just because you're good at something doesn't mean you enjoy it. And just because you enjoy it now doesn't mean you're going to continue to enjoy it in 10 or 20 years from now, which is why you constantly need to check on what is it that you're intrinsically motivated to do, which is the first of the 4 elements that I discuss in the Success Factor. The intrinsic motivation, it comes from within. There's a fire burning within you. You would do it for free if you could. It's why you wake up in the morning and you can't quiet your brain at night. It is absolutely all you are thinking about, which is very different, as you know, from extrinsic motivation, the promotions, the awards, the diplomas. That's other people judging you. And when other people are judging you, you cannot maintain that motivation. And usually what happens is you will fail out or burn out. So it has to come from within. And I tell people, a large group of the people who I interviewed are astronauts. Astronauts are government workers, or at least they were, right? They're government workers. They're not getting an enormous salary. But if you ask them, it's like, I had to go to space. I absolutely had to. And, if they tell you my mission was for 2 weeks, they say that wasn't enough. I wish I could have gone for longer. They loved it that much. And it comes with a ton of sacrifice, right? You're leaving your family behind. Even before you go to space, you have to be in quarantine for a long time. Look how challenging it was for us to be in quarantine and stay at home. They did it because they wanted to, because they wanted to go to space. So they made sure that they were not around other people before they ever got in the space shuttle. That's an intrinsic motivation.
I see. Now, even though they knew that the outcome, not the outcome, but just the possible issues may have muscle atrophy and all so on and so forth, they still wanted to go and explore and figure out exactly what or how outer space is.
That's right. That's right. And it's an eclectic group of people, right? And it's an international group, but this is what they wanted to do. And they really work toward that, which is that the second element of success, right? When you love what you do, you are going to outwork and outpace everyone. You are going to have the most pristine work ethic, not because you can't, you're just going to work 18 hours a day or 80 hours a week. It's not about that, because the people who are so successful understand that the rest is just important as the work. They fully understand that. But their work, they leverage every minute of their workday because they understand that they work smarter, not just harder. Mm-hmm. And they fully understand that because they know that as they're working towards something, it's really fueling and being fueled by that intrinsic motivation.
Wow.
So
how do you, those who actually are in their mid-50s and they want to change career, but they fear, how do you help them cope with that fear? How do you help them kind of like overcome those possible challenges they may face? Because let's say they lose their steam after 30 years of doing the same thing over and over again. And they, like you said, they were never really passionate about it. So how do you help them change their mindset and allow them to say, you know what, you can start at any time or at any age?
So true. So true. What I do is I take people through what's called a passion audit, which is really to see what it is that you're passionate about right now. And I recommend that people revisit this passion audit every time they're either feeling a little burnt out, or they don't love what they do anymore, or they had a big life transition, right? A new job, a new child, a move, a pandemic. And this is really to figure out what it is that you are good at, what you enjoy doing, what you're good at and you don't enjoy doing, what you would do for free if you could. And there's all different ways that we can hint at what it is that you procrastinate doing, what you do instead while you're procrastinating. And that really gives you a good idea. And in fact, if your listeners want to do their own passion audit, they can just download a free one from my website, which is Ruth Gotian, RUTHGOT, like Tom, IAN like Nancy.com/passion audit. So it's ruthgotian.com/passion audit. And they could just download one for themselves for free.
Wow. Okay. Well, I hope that all the listeners will take advantage of that. Now, to be able to summarize, when it comes to the writing of the book, what kind of challenges did you face when it comes to writing and the interviewing process, etc.? Did you come up with the writer's block? And how did you overcome that?
So I didn't enjoy writing until recently. My grandmother always told me I was a beautiful writer, but she's my grandma. She has to say that. Yes. And I always felt constrained because I was writing under other people's rules, right? They tell you to write an essay in school. They tell you the topic, they tell you how many words, and you write. And then when I went to grad school, I had an advisor who was a beautiful writer, Dr. Marie Volpe. And she got me to find my voice in my writing. And she taught me how to tighten up my writing so that not even one single word is superfluous. And then when I got this book deal for The Success Factor, this topic has been burning inside of me. The hardest part, I had over 100 interviews, was finding the right stories to put in, because as I talk about the 4 elements of success, the reader will actually get to hear the stories of these incredibly successful people like Maxine Clark, the founder and CEO of Build-A-Bear Workshop, and Steve Kerr, the 8-time NBA champion, and Dr. Peggy Whitson, the former NASA chief astronaut who spent more days in space than any American astronaut, and the Nobel Prize winner. So they will actually hear the stories. And when I interviewed these amazing people, I said to them, I am not interested in what I can Google about you. I don't need to have the interview if that's what we're doing. Instead, I want to know about what it took to get there. And those things you don't find on Google.
No.
And they poured it out for me. And the hardest part was getting the right stories in there. And sadly, I could not include all the stories in the book. So we may have to have another one because there's so many incredible stories.
Second edition.
But you know what, Dan, the astronaut and the Nobel Prize winning scientist is just like an Olympic figure skater. Exactly the same mindset. And that's when I realized these are learned skills. And if they're learned skills, I'm an adult educator. I can teach that. So I wrote, and I did this, by the way, while working full time. And I spent every weekend of the pandemic writing this book. And it is so much love and so much work, but it's really a labor of love, this book. And I cannot wait for people to read The Success Factor.
I am actually very excited to read it as well. Trust me. I wrote myself a few books, and one of my best book out of the 10 was the How to Reach Happiness Under 100 Days. But then again, I say that, well, is it 100 calendar days or is it 100 days that will take you 10 years? So it will teach you how to be able to adapt a new concept of happiness that allows you to be able to integrate not just the external factors that may come to you, either positive or negative, but as you said, it's intrinsic, which is it's from inner. And they have to learn how to be happy before getting the money, before getting the home, before getting the spouse, the kids, etc. And a lot of people don't know how to be happy with themselves. So they look for other situation or other circumstances that will allow them to be happy. And this is where they're going wrong. And that's something that I have learned and I have taught in the book.
That's right. And that's the extrinsic motivation. If you're doing it for somebody else, for other people's judgments, you're going to fail out or burn out. It happens every time.
That is correct. Now, the title Success Factor, has to do anything with the Fear Factor show that it was with a few years back?
No, no. In fact, I was going to call it fear not trying more than you fear failing, but that was a little too wordy. Okay. We went through quite a number of titles before we found this one. And there were some really great ones, but this, I think, appeals to a large audience.
And they because the success has a positive note. Fear has a negative note. So
that's right.
Automatically, when people look at the book, they have to really feel an incentive to want to read it. But if they look at negative, said, oh God, this is like the news on TV, another negative, forget about it. So
I am not that kind of person.
Excellent. So that's all the time we have for today's podcast. I do appreciate the time you took out of your very busy schedule, Ruth, to be able to join us. Thank you again for participating and inspiring our many listeners. Now, we hope you have all enjoyed today's episode, and I'm very excited about the many upcoming guests that we have scheduled for the Happiness Journey podcast, filled with inspirational stories, just like the one you listened to today. Now, here are a few concluding words of wisdom. Best case scenario, you are really a magnificent, powerful, divine being of light. Your thoughts really do become things. Nothing is impossible. Your dreams are meant to be. And these words of wisdom are from an ancient, wise, all-loving, all-knowing best friend. Worst case scenario, you're just dreaming. You're magnificent, powerful, divine being of light. Your thoughts really do become things. Nothing is impossible. Your dreams are meant to be. And these words of wisdom really are from an ancient, wise, all-loving, all-knowing best friend. And the difference would be between both is just a dream. So why don't you make it a reality? My name is Dr. Dan Amzalag, and you may all keep pursuing your amazing journey in life.